Hi, I'm Dr. Allan Perel, and this is Conversations in Medicine. This program usually brings cutting-edge medical topics to the Staten Island and New York City community. Today we're going to do something different. We're in the spring of 2022, and we're going to be talking about Passover. We all enjoy our holidays, and in the spring, this year we have 3 holidays with people of different faiths, and the Jewish people celebrate Passover. So I've got some experts here to talk about Passover and explain it to all of us and that we could all enjoy it, whether we're celebrating Passover ourselves or whether we're watching our neighbors or our friends be involved with Passover. Many of us have been to a Seder, and we're going to talk about what that is and what matzah is and what you can do and what you can't do on Passover. And as I said, I have some wonderful, wonderful experts. First, I'm going to introduce Serge Binder, who's the treasurer of Torah's Emes on Staten Island. I want to say thank you, Serge, for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I have Ivry. She's a student at RJJ School, Hebrew School on Staten Island. Welcome.
Hi.
I have Shmuel Ivry, another student at RJJ, Hebrew School on Staten Island. Welcome. And I have our eminent guest, Rabbi Jochanan Ivry, the spiritual leader and rabbi at Torah's Emes on Staten Island. So thank you and welcome all of you to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about Passover. And as a simple country doctor, I don't know everything about Passover, so we have you as our experts. And I'm going to ask you guys some questions and try to explain it to us. So tell us, what is Passover and what's its relevance to us today?
So Passover historically begins 3,334 years when the Israelites were in the ancient land of Egypt. And for 210 years, they were exiled there. They were under slavery and bondage. And it was their cries that God heard when he sent Moses as the leader. And as this depicted in the book of Exodus, Pharaoh, the king at the time, was very stubborn. And even after miraculous and very frightening and terrible plagues, he was not willing to let the Jewish people out of Egypt until finally the final plague, and it was that night when they all left, when they were encouraged to leave, and that's the story of Passover, when they all left. And prior to that, God commanded the Paschal offering, the Seder, that we would call the Seder, which is the get-together, family get-together, and the order, Seder means order, where they celebrated their first Passover in Egypt, and had the matzah, the famous unleavened bread, and the Paschal offering, as well as the bitter herbs. And
the bitter herbs commemorate what?
Of course, the bitter times, the bitter, difficult challenges.
Maybe we'll start. We have every time we have wonderful things to look at, and thank you, Allan and Shmuel, for coming and helping us prepare the Seder plate. So if you go to a Seder, there are things on this plate. And if you could just describe what they are and their symbolism, I think that would help us all understand it a little bit more.
Right. So we begin with the candle. We have the candles that we light prior to the holiday. That's preceded traditionally by giving some charity before the holiday, and the kids will place a little coin into the charity box to show that act of kindness and that caring heart that we have for others. One good deed, as Maimonides puts it, could tip the entire cosmic scale and bring salvation. So we want to do a nice deed before the onset of the holiday, and then we begin with what's called the Kadesh, the sanctifying the day with either the wine, the grape juice. We use specifically the dark red wine or grape juice, and something of a wine that is prestigious, something that's very, very royal, because Passover is a night where, on one hand, as you mentioned, we remember the bitter times, but we also are celebrating the freedom and the tremendous blessing of being a free nation.
So tell us what's on the Seder plate. Let's go through
So
all
we,
the things.
so we
that are
start
here.
with the kiddush, the wine. We have, of course, the matzah on the Seder plate. The matzah is as mentioned, the unleavened bread. It takes, how long does it take to bake the matzah? Anyone?
18 minutes.
18
Less
minutes.
than 18 minutes.
Well,
right?
within 18
No
minutes
more.
from the time, the flour and water. And by the way, what are the ingredients of the matzah?
Flour and water.
Only flour and water. Do we add any eggs, salt? Nothing.
Yeast?
Certainly not yeast. We don't want the bread to rise. The first step to freedom is that humility. The matzah represents that humility, that flat, humble approach that we have in being a free nation. It's not sort of the boastful and sort of arrogant type of behavior that we want to portray. We want to be humble. And that's why, incidentally, I wanted to mention, we search for any leavened food, any food that is not kosher for Passover, right? The night before the
Things made
Seder.
of bread or things like that. We call it chametz.
Correct. The entire house. We do a spring cleaning, right? Before, of course, weeks before, or some people even a month before. And we use a feather to clean out the little nooks and crannies in the home. We use a candle, and we're so careful. We don't want to use we want to use a wooden spoon so that we're able to burn it afterwards, together with the 10 pieces of bread that we place around the home, so that we really do our best to get rid of any amount of leavened food, any amount of bread or crackers. Sometimes we get our cookies. The idea is to get rid of that haughtiness and arrogance on a spiritual level. We want to remain humble.
So I'm going to go over some things. So tell us about the salt water.
So getting to so then we have the three matzahs. We have the salt water, which reminds us, of course, of the. What does the salt water remind us of?
Tears.
The tears,
Tears.
and also the sweat
Sweat.
that the Israelites endured during the time of their Egyptian bondage. We have the charoses. Charoses is that's probably the most delicious part of the Seder plate. That's the mixture of the crushed apples, pears, nuts, right? Walnuts usually, and also mixed with some wine or grape juice, and it gives that sweet taste. It's a nice paste that reminds us of the cement, the mortar that the people prepared during their Egyptian bondage. Turns out to be quite sweet. Then we also have the hard-boiled egg, which is the beya. That reminds us of the offerings they would bring during the times of the temple. The onion, or some people use celery, that reminds us of the bitter or difficult times that they endured, as well as the maror, of course, which is the horseradish.
Bitter herb.
That's the bitter herb,
That's
right.
really the horseradish. Sometimes we think about it in the jar.
Correct.
This is actually the vegetable that it comes from.
Correct. And they say that the true courageous people would actually take chunks or cubes of the horseradish and literally endure. The idea is to really feel that suffering and pain. It also clears the sinuses.
Right.
But
I
definitely,
did it once.
right? It reminds us of that pain and suffering. So we have this dichotomy in Passover. On one hand, we're remembering the bitter times, the bitterness, right, the sad times. And on the other hand, we're also celebrating being able to be free and being able to be grateful for what we have.
So I know one of the customs, and clearly all of you who've gone to a Seder, have always heard the children singing in the very beginning about why this is a different day than other days. And you mentioned that we're both celebrating and we're also remembering some of the toil that our brethren went through generations ago, over 3,000 years ago, as slaves, and how hard their life was. And sometimes people think about it as the movie The Ten Commandments, but clearly there's some misperceptions even in that. But the idea of what people are going through, and we want to make you an expert at when you go to the Seder, so that's important. The Jewish people need to go to a Seder, and the people who are not Jewish who are invited to Seders, now you can have some information before you get there. So now what I'd love you guys to do is we're going to sing a song that many people think about and say, they call it the 4 questions. Why is this a different day and different night than other nights? And maybe it's usually sung by the youngest, so you guys definitely make that, both of you, the youngest young man and the youngest young lady. So maybe we can sing
Here
our
you
song
guys.
together.
Okay. So here we go. Ready? You want to sing together?
Why is this night different from all the other nights? From all the other nights. to matzah, chame to matzah, that all year to year we commit and matzah. Laza, kulo matzah, kulo matzah. But on the night of Pesach, we only eat matzah.
Beautiful. Yeah, I want to interject here and mention that the questions are really divided into two categories. They're asking, why do we eat the matzah? We don't have ordinary bread. Why do we have the bitter herbs? We don't have other vegetables. Specifically, we have the bitter herbs. And then the other part of the question, the other two questions are, why do we dip, which normally, the vegetable in the salt water and the bitter herbs in the charosas, which dipping would signify a type of royalty that people would eat, dipping their foods either in oil or in other liquids. That shows a sign of having that royal type of demeanor. And then the other question of why we leaning is also a sign of being free. So we're celebrating. So it seems like two opposites. On one hand, we're thinking of the poor man's bread, the matzah, the flat cracker that we eat. We have the bitter herbs. And on the other hand, we're also celebrating freedom and royalty. Which one is it? And that's their question, essentially. And the answer is, Avadim Hayinu, the Pharaoh Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And right after that, God took us out with a great hand and with outstretched hand. In other words, in times of despair, in times of difficulty, in times of challenge, and we could all relate to this on a personal level, on a communal level, on a global level, we see sometimes in life very difficult moments, and we say, how are we going to get out of here, out of this situation? And the answer is that in one moment, there's a famous verse, Esa Einai Laharim, Psalm 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains, Me'ayin Yavu Ezri, from where will my help come from? And some interpretations is Me'ayin, from the level of Ayin, which is a very high level spiritually. That's where our help comes. When we think that there's no way out, we seem to almost lose hope, God forbid, that's when God brings salvation. In one moment, when the Israelites were under tremendous pressure and difficulty, and it was almost impossible to see any salvation, that's when they were taken out. Millions of men, women, and children, could you imagine, after such a long ordeal, they were brought to salvation and freedom.
So Serge, thank you so much for being here. You're the treasurer of the synagogue, someone who I know for a long time, and one of the most articulate people I know. And I know that your family and yourself were from the former Soviet Union. And maybe you could just bring to our audience here a little bit of your perspective about Passover and what Passover was like for your family.
Before coming to the United States, I really didn't understand what Passover actually was. We only knew that sometime in the spring, matzah suddenly appeared in the house. In the town that I'm from, there was only one synagogue in the entire city, because all the others were closed when the communists came to power, and then most of the Jewish population left. So you had to go to that synagogue, and it wasn't close to our house. It was quite a journey to get there, and you didn't want people to see you going into the synagogue, but you would have to go and get the matzah and then bring it home. But that's where the fun started, because Grandma always made great matzah ball soup. Grandma made babka, which is a cake that you make with layered matzah layers, and it was great fun. And then the family got together, okay? So I've come a long way when it comes to Passover, with just getting together with the family was just a tradition, because my grandfather was the last person who actually had formal Jewish education. We didn't. We went to school. We were educated in dialectical materialism in Soviet school. But he was the last one who had Jewish education, and of course that's why he gathered people around and made sure that the tradition is observed. We really didn't understand what the tradition was until I got here, and of course Rabbi Ivry is a big part of my Jewish awakening and my Jewish awareness. But then, of course, after all these years, I'm here on the show with Dr. Perel, and he called me an expert, which is kind of ironic.
Everyone's an expert.
Relative to
If
what?
you say so.
Relative to where you came from.
Most certainly. Like I said, I've come a long way from just getting together and eating matzo ball soup and being here on the show and educating people about what Passover really is. And to us, of course, it's a path to salvation. It's a path to freedom, and I think now more than ever, we all want that, shining light, and we want that path to freedom and salvation.
And it's a beautiful tradition. In a sense, so much of the way, just the idea, you could always go one step further, whether it's just having matzah in your home, that you have someone from the Chabad, the Lubavitch, one of the young people is dropping it off, to then having a Seder, to going to someone's Seder, to them praying, to doing things. You could always go one step higher.
Absolutely. It takes a little getting used to, because the first time I actually went to the rabbi's house for Seder, we had to wait for a long time until the feast started. We had to go through the formal Seder, dunking the egg into the salt water, chewing in the maror. Definitely cleared my sinuses. But then, of course, the feast started, and you understand, after going through the formal Seder, you actually understand what the tradition is all about and why you're doing that. So it's a beautiful tradition. I'm sure the rabbi will tell you about other things that we do, like leaving the door open for Elijah, because and then what the kids do, because it really is great family affair, for everybody to get together.
Right. One of the things we do in the Seder actually means order, and there's 15 steps to that order. And one of the things we do at the beginning is we break the middle matzah, and we break it in half, and we hide the larger piece. And usually the kids either find it and they try to ransom that piece, because we cannot complete the Seder until we find that matzah at the end. And that really signifies the idea that the Seder, the whole ceremony has to be on a broken piece, which means that we have to recognize that brokenness. That we all in some way we're not complete, we're not whole, and there are people suffering, of course. And in fact, one of the opening stanzas in the Haggadah, which is the booklet that we use on the Seder night, is
so that's the prayer book that
the prayer book that
the
has
guide that we have.
Right, because the real central theme is to recount the story. I mean, people ask, how do you celebrate a history of 3,334 years? I mean, how do you continue living in all different countries and cultures and language? How do you continue that? And the answer, of course, is having that ability to recount the story to the children specifically. We want the kids to be asking that question. And the idea is, like you mentioned, the 4 questions. We want them to open up, the forum so that we could have that discussion. And some Seders last, as Serge mentioned, really late into the night. And of course, we have a delicious, amazing meal. But at the same time, we want to also cherish that moment that we have. We could connect. Pesach in Hebrew, which is Passover, means the mouth that speaks. The idea of speech is so important. Relating, communication. Sometimes we're on our phones. We're so busy that we're so engrossed in what we're doing, and we don't have time to spend looking at our children, at our spouses, at our loved ones. And here's an opportunity to we just put away the phone, put away all these things, distractions. What do they call them? Weapons of mass distractions.
Well, you confiscated mine at the door.
So. Right. We
don't want
we
any
leave
phones
it.
going off on our TV show.
Right. We, of course,
unless
we have an emergency. But generally, the idea is that we want to communicate. We want to have that interaction. That's the greatest challenge.
So
I think
tell us about the relevance of Passover this and now. And maybe you could mention, someone in the clergy, there are a number of other holidays that are coming up in the springtime. So tell us really the relationship between those and how we should all interact with others.
I think this year is very unique because we do have all the 3 major religions, Judaism, Catholic religion, the Christian religion, and as well as Islam, all coincide in the same time. Spring, of course, is a time of renewal. And with everything we see what's going on in the world, we always believe I heard a beautiful saying. Serge was talking about waiting to the end of the Seder, where it seems like a long process, they say that in the end it's going to be good, and if it's not good, it's not the end. You know, we just have to hold on for a little longer, and that's really what the Seder teaches us. That, you know, we always have that hope. If you mentioned about Elijah opening up the door towards the end of the Seder, we open the door. Elijah is the prophet that's going to herald in the time of the Messiah, of world utopia. There will be no more wars, no more strife and jealousy and all negative feelings that unfortunately bring about very difficult times. So that's going to be the end and that's the end. That is the good ending that we all hope for, and we hope it will happen soon.
So maybe just ask you, what's the relevance of Passover to you guys? It could be the kids or Serge, just whoever wants to talk a little bit.
Do you want to talk?
What, you like opening up the door for Elijah?
Is
Is
it
that
nice to have the
one
whole
of your
family home?
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Well,
Serge?
for me, it's always family getting together. Okay, whenever you can get everybody together in the same room and celebrate your tradition and have a nice meal and have a nice conversation after formal Seder, of course, Rabbi, of course, after formal Seder. Okay, that is always a great time, because what is more important than family, aside from the fact that this is a tradition of people coming from slavery and going towards freedom? And to me, that is actually, I made my exodus from the Soviet Union and I got here, okay? That was my exodus. So this holiday has a very special meaning for me, because I am now a free man, you know, enjoying all the freedoms that, you know, the free country offers. So very meaningful for me. What about you?
Ella,
Um,
what's your favorite part of the Seder?
I like opening the door for
Elijah.
Elijah.
So you know what, I'll actually interrupt. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit more and say, you know, there's a prayer, there's a song that comes in the middle of the Seder. And really what the Seder means to me is enough. That whatever good things have happened, and sometimes not such good things, it's enough. So, and we sing a very famous song. And the Hebrew word for enough is dayenu. And we're going to do this little song that is at every single Seder. Every person who's ever been to a Seder sings this song. And it basically says that we thank God that whatever we have, we should be happy for it, and that's enough. And we can't always strive for more, for bigger things, for other things. We could strive for them, but we don't always we have to be happy at least with what we have. Because especially in this country, and especially in New York City and Staten Island, we have to be very grateful for where we are now. We have other goals, Messianic era, for best to be in Israel, and all the things that you could think of. But at least right now we want to think about things being enough. So, Serge has it open already, so I'll let you start.
No, I'll have the kids start.
Okay,
You know,
the starts are up.
I'm
You want to
always have
start?
the kids start.
Ilu,
Ilu,
Hotzianu,
Hotzianu,
Mitzrayim, Hotzianu, Mitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Ilu asavahem shvati v'lo asav Eloheim Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. There's a beautiful story of Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha was one of the great Hasidic masters in the 18th century, towards the end of the 18th century. And he was someone who lived very impoverished life, a lot of life of suffering and very tremendous challenges. And his students came to him and said, you know, we were sent by the Hasidic master, Rabbi, the Maggid of Mizrich, to answer a question. How is it that we're supposed to, as you mentioned, we're supposed to thank God for bad things with the same gratitude that we have for good things. When good things happen, we're of course happy. Even for bad things, we're grateful. And how do we have that same gratitude? So this guy, he living in a very dilapidated house, very impoverished, faced tremendous challenges. He says, I cannot answer that question. He says, why not? He says, I don't know what's bad. What is bad? everything is good. The fact that I woke up this morning, I'm grateful for that. Famous Viktor Frankl, we may have mentioned in one of the shows, psychoanalysis, who was actually in the camps himself, and he was just amazed in one of his interactions with one of the Holocaust victims, a young woman who came from a very aristocratic family, was now lying in this wooden barrack and just smiling on her face. He said, how are you happy? I mean, coming from your background, she says, you see that crack through the wall? I'm able to see the sunrise. I'm so grateful for that. And like you mentioned, we certainly have to always be grateful, especially seeing other circumstances of other people, and always realize how grateful we should be, and hope for better times for everyone.
We're coming to the end, but I want to thank everyone. And there are just a couple of things.
You want to give Shmuel a chance to say what his
favorite
part?
Oh, Shmuel, I'm sorry. My apologies.
What's your favorite part?
Telling over the story of Egypt.
Okay. And we do that for a long time. We talk about all the 10 plagues. My wife has a tradition in our house. She likes little frogs she puts out and little things. So we see
Make it
the
very
different ones.
interesting and
So
animating.
we try to get everybody interactive with it. But what I want to now just talk about, just briefly, is if somebody wants to go to a Seder, and I mean the tradition, I think the Chabad, Lubavitch, and a lot of people have opened up Seders to people all over, really for minimal cost and for nothing. And I think David, my wonderful producer there, has a little thing at the end to say where to go or who to call.
Correct.
So maybe you could just talk about that a little bit. If somebody, it's almost towards the Seder.
Right.
The Seders are going to be
in
a few days.
In the 1970s, I think there was a movement to leave an empty seat for the Jews from the former Soviet Union who were not able to celebrate a Seder. Right, it was forbidden, right, as we heard from Serge. And Lubavitch Rebbe, who happens to be we celebrate his 120th birthday today. He said that instead of leaving that seat empty, let's fill it with someone who doesn't have the opportunity to celebrate a Seder, and try to open, we have Seders in Nepal. Thousands of Israeli backpackers would celebrate. So many different countries, in India, in South Africa, all over. But certainly here in New York or wherever you're watching this, you could go to LubavitchYouth.org. They are a wonderful organization that will guide you and help you find. Here on Staten Island, you're welcome to contact us, TorahSemitisOnline.org, for a nice Seder, communal Seder, and just realize that Seder is welcoming anyone and everyone to a beautiful experience of really cherishing the beautiful holiday.
Thank you. And if you are invited to a Seder, please don't miss the opportunity. At least once, if you're not Jewish, go to a Seder, see what it's about. In my home, I've had many of my friends, both Jewish and non-Jewish, over, and they're sort of amazed at the event that occurs. We've given you a small little, we call it like a Vorspeise, taste of the Seder. But the idea of what the Seder is so important. It brings people together, and that's what's so beautiful. So in the last closing seconds, I just want to say today happens to be my anniversary. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Susan, my kids, Harrison, Evan, and Jackie, for letting me come here tonight to do the show. And I want to thank my mom, who's getting better after having some hip surgery. And I want to say happy Passover to everyone.
Happy Passover and happy anniversary.
Beautiful. Very nice.
Good job, guys.